And as RFK Jr. endorses former President Trump, speculation is growing that the two might be joining forces tonight at a campaign event in Phoenix, Arizona. Meanwhile, the Trump campaign is citing data to say the new endorsement will help Trump in battleground states. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao, who is in Phoenix, Arizona, where Trump will be speaking later this evening. Iris, what can you tell us?
Good evening to you, Steve. So at around 4 p.m. MST or about 6 p.m. Eastern time, former President Trump will be taking the stage right behind us here in Gleaned, Arizona, just outside of Phoenix, and it's an event hosted by Turning Point Action. The Trump campaign announced just today that there will be a special guest joining Trump tonight, and that's right after RFK Jr. is reportedly endorsing Trump. And RFK Jr. also just spoke earlier in Phoenix today, informally throwing his support for the former president. And meanwhile, just earlier, Trump spoke in Las Vegas at an event about no tax on tips, in which he gave his initial reaction to RFK Jr.'s support. Watch.
We just had a very nice endorsement from RFK Jr., Bobby. And I'll be talking about that. We're heading out right after this. We're going to be going to Arizona. We'll be talking about that.
And it comes as former President Trump has been on a week-long battleground state blitz this week as counter-programming to the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Yesterday, he was touring the border in Tucson, Arizona, where he told us about this, about RFK Jr. He said that he's been treating rather unfairly when it comes to the election, also saying that he has a great respect for RFK Jr.
I've known him a long time, very smart. Don't forget he was treated very unfairly. I think he would have beaten Biden in a primary, the Kennedy name and him in particular. And they made it impossible. They said you have to get 70% of the vote just to qualifiers.
And now the big question is, how does RFK Jr.'s exit from the race and now endorsement for the former president will impact the 2024 elections? We know that RFK Jr. himself has been saying how if he stays in the race, he might be a spoiler for the Trump campaign, especially in battleground states. And the Trump campaign, meanwhile, today sent out an internal memo, including citing data from a pollster saying how RFK Jr.'s exit is, quote, believed in battleground states he would be quote, that it's gonna, in every single state, RFK Jr.'s vote breaks for President Trump. Specifically, gave the example of how in the battleground state of here in Arizona, that according to a model in 2020, that the net vote gained in the state of Arizona would be over 41,000 votes, which is nearly 4 times President Biden's winning margin here in 2020. And so a lot of speculation about how the new situation will impact upcoming polls. But we know that tonight Trump will talk more extensively about this. Meanwhile, former Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign is also responding to the latest news by calling on voters for RFK Jr. to vote for Harris instead. It says in the campaign statement that, quote, Vice President Kamala Harris wants to earn your support. And, quote, even if we do not agree on every issue, Kamala Harris knows there is more that unites us than divides us, including respect for our rights, public safety, protecting our freedoms, and opportunity for all. So it's common themes that Kamala Harris has been repeating just last night at the Democratic National Convention, calling on voters across this political spectrum to vote for her a theme of the campaign, including freedoms, equality, and opportunities for the middle class. And of course, tonight will be Trump's first formal big speech about the campaign after the DNC speech given by Harris. So a lot to look for tonight, as we might expect that special guest turn out to be RFK Jr. Back to you.
Iris will certainly be keeping an eye on how this big Democratic namesake, the Kennedy namesake, may impact this race with the endorsement of former President Trump. NTD's Iris Tao live from Phoenix. Thank you, Iris. Zoom in on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. himself. NTD's David Lamb has more from Arizona as well.
I'm here in Phoenix, Arizona, and if the presidential election is anything like the weather, it's heating up. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. just announced that he's suspending his presidential campaign and endorsing former President Trump. He said that he spoke with Trump over the past few weeks in intense, long discussions and found that they aligned on several issues and disagreed greatly on a number of other issues. But the main issue is that Trump said he will end the Ukraine and Russian war on the first day of being in the White House, and that this alone would justify Kennedy's support for him.
3 great causes drove me to enter this race in the first place, primarily. And these are the principal causes that persuaded me to leave the Democratic Party and run as an independent, and now to throw my support to President Trump. The causes were free speech, the war in Ukraine, and the war on our children. In my heart, I no longer believe that I have a realistic path to electoral victory in the face of this relentless, systematic censorship and media control. So I cannot in good conscience ask my staff and volunteers to keep working their long hours or ask my donors to keep giving when I cannot honestly tell them that I have a real path to the White House.
Now, Kennedy also said that this decision is an agonizing one for his family, wife, and friends, but he has hope. He believes that if Trump keeps his word, that America would be healthier and more successful in the next couple of years, and the war would end sooner. Back to you in the newsroom. David Lamb, NCD News.
And proof of citizenship is now required to vote in the state of Arizona. That's after the Supreme Court approved a request from the Republican National Committee and voted to reinstate part of an Arizona law. The justices ruled 5-4, with Amy Coney Barrett joining the 3 liberal justices, the ruling partially agreeing with the request made by the Republican National Committee. It had filed an emergency request just ahead of Arizona's ballot printing deadline. The decision impacts more than 40,000 people who are registered to vote this November, according to Arizona's Secretary of State. The RNC has similar lawsuits in the works targeting key swing states like those of Michigan and North Carolina. RNC Chairman Michael Whatley described the effort as, quote, a seismic win in the fight to stop non-citizens from voting. And RFK Jr. had some harsh words for the Democratic Party in the mainstream media today. This as he announced what he called his heart-rending and agonizing decision to suspend his presidential campaign. So how has RFK Jr. changed American politics with his hard-fought campaign as an independent? And how has his campaign highlighted free speech, war, and childhood disease for the American people? Joining me now to discuss the influence of RFK Jr.'s campaign and his major announcement is former Georgia Congressman Doug Collins. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, glad to be with you.
Great to have you back, Congressman. So did RFK Jr.'s independent campaign make any dent in American politics? He went to great efforts to get on the ballot in each state, and has he changed the public discourse about the issues on his platform?
I think he did to an extent, as much as you can as an independent and someone who has had the Democratic Party and its political machine and its media machine, namely the main media of ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, PBS, and the Times and everybody else, basically try to do everything they could to destroy the campaign. He brought up issues that were dear to his heart. He continued that process. But at the end of the day, when the Democratic Party turned all of its fire against him to keep him off the ballots, to keep ballot access away from him because they were scared of what he would do to Joe Biden, there really became no pathway for him to actually end up being the nominee.
How do you see RFK Jr.'s support for former President Trump impacting this presidential race?
I think it'll help some of his supporters find a home. I think a lot of them were more affiliated with Trump to start with. They probably were a little bit more libertarian, as Kennedy is in some areas. So he gave them an outlet to go vote if they wasn't all that in favor of voting for Trump. But now he's actually coming to the point of saying, look, we've got a real problem in the country. Harris is a problem that will take away the freedom of speech, take away and keep us in, from their opinion, wars and keeping the status quo going. You now have an opportunity to realize that, Donald Trump may not be me, but he's better than Harris. And I think that's going to be the message that resonates.
Congressman, we're a day out of the DNC. I want to get your thoughts on how you think it went for the Democrats, and how do you think former President Trump can effectively counter the seemingly rebranding of the Democratic Party? And will we see him visiting the border? What are the strongest points of his message now?
Well, number one, the Democratic Convention tried to portray itself as something of a Democratic Party that no longer exists. If you notice, they put all of the older Democratic Party figures, the Obamas, the Clintons, everybody earlier on in the evening where most people saw them. They had to wait up late to, they pushed Joe Biden to 11:45 Eastern time. They pushed even Walz's speech didn't start till almost 11:30. They don't want the American people to know that they are a liberal branded Democratic Party now. They want to think of them as the older Democratic Party that they may have fonder feelings for. So that was the first thing I thought. That was the narrative that was spun. And then the second narrative that was spun was, we're not going to talk about our problems, which are Harris's problems and Biden's problems, such as the economy, immigration, the drug issues, things like that. They decided to prop up straw man arguments such as, the Republicans want to take away your freedoms, your reproductive rights, your marriage, and who choices of your relationships, which all have not been anywhere remotely part of the Republican platform. So again, I think what they tried to do, and they did fairly well at doing it because they choreographed everything, was to try and give you a picture of a Democratic Party that doesn't exist, to try and get you to vote for the Democratic Party that does exist today.
And Congressman, in what areas did you think, if at all, Vice President Harris succeeded in her speech, and where did she miss the mark in connecting with the broader electorate?
Well, there's nothing in there really about what she'll do. It was all platitudes. It was all Donald Trump bad. I'm going to do good. This idea that they can start fixing things on day one is pretty hilarious, coming from a sitting vice president whose actual first day was June 20th, 2021. And she has signed on to every bad idea that Joe Biden's and her administration has done. So again, I think this is where the campaign starts for Donald Trump, and getting back into the messaging of just saying, look, you're not better off than you were 4 years ago. Our border is open. We're at war. We've had energy independence that's now become energy dependence. And, our economy, you're paying, more for diesel, more for gas. You're paying more for your electricity. You're paying more for your eggs. You're more for your bread. And the reason that is Vice President Harris and Joe Biden. If you want to continue to do those bad things that they say they'll now fix, then you might better vote for Donald Trump.
Now, there's so much news breaking today. This next question could, I think, easily get buried in the headlines. As a Georgian in the critical state and now battleground state of Georgia, how do you view the apparent reconciliation between Trump and Governor Brian Kemp, who seem to have had a rift? Is it too late for this alliance to make a difference? And what are the chances we'll see them share a stage at a campaign rally in Georgia?
You may. I think that's probably a good probability. Look, both men had the same goal, and that's to beat Vice President Harris. Or Joe Biden in the beginning. Governor Kemp had never said that he was not going to vote. He was not like our lieutenant governor, who turned his back on his conservative values and decided to run away from those values. Governor Kemp had always said that he was going to fight up and down the ticket for the November to win, Republicans to win. And last night he, said Donald Trump needs to win. So I think, look, it's a good thing for both of them to be on the same page as they have been, but now just publicly so the media doesn't have to talk about it anymore.
Former Georgia Congressman Doug Collins, as always, really appreciate your perspective. Thank you.
You take care.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.